So in this video, I will show you how to use your new gradebook for this semester. You will be using this gradebook to mainly enter student grades either manually or import them directly from Google Classroom, look at student grades and their progress, and then looking at the graphs and their progress reports as well, and then collaboratively work with your teachers, your teacher team, to make sense of the data from the grades. At the same time, the gradebook will be importing and linking to your quizzes directly, so you're going to find them there in the quiz column, as well as at the end of the semester, the final exam will be there as well. So let's get started. Now, there are three main components of the gradebook. The first main component is called the overview page, or what we call the overview sheet. Now, this overview sheet is mainly for you to know how the components of your subject are labeled by your coordinator. And then it helps you access data across sections. The second component is individual report. In this individual report sheet, you'll be able to find more detailed information and data about every student individual progress. And the third component is your section gradebook. So you have, for example, here in this case, the example is grade 6 science. You'll find all the sections of grade 6 science here. All right, so aqua, beige, brown, green, gold, and it's going to include all the sections from both campuses, Rauda and Hira. Of course, every teacher should be accessing his or her own section only to enter the grades. So let's go back to the first sheet, which is the overview page. Now, this overview sheet gives you main insight about all the grades in your gradebook. It starts with at the top with the main information about your gradebook, which is in this case, this is grade 6 science, and the current date and time. And then on the left, you have three important icons you can use. The first one links to tutorials on this gradebook and any database that helps you on how to use the gradebook itself. The second one is a form. You can fill in the form and open a ticket if you have any issue, any major issue in the gradebook. For example, you're not able to edit your section is not found. So these sort of errors that you find, you can just click here and it's going to take you to the form where you can fill in the information to help you to solve the issue. If you have any small issues in using the gradebook, you can just go to Google Chat and then add in the chat box your issue that you want to actually discuss. So the chat is for minor issues, and if you have a major issue, like for example, not able to edit or accessing gradebook, then you can open a ticket there. On the right side at the top here, you have the sections in the team, and these sections are linked to the sheets. For example, if I want to go to my aqua, I can click on aqua and click here, and it's going to take me to my sheet directly. If I want to go back to the overview, I can click on back and then click on overview, and it's going to take me back to the overview sheet as well. And next to each section is going to be where the teacher name, which teacher is teaching that section. Now, in this part, the component part, this is only edited by your coordinator. Please do not edit anything here. This is only edited by your coordinator. This is where you can see the date of the component, for example, the homework, the category itself, and description as added by your coordinator. So let's assume I'm the coordinator here. I'm going to add, let's say, for example, I have the homework, January 20, and the category is homework 1. And let's say here we have, let's say, free fall lesson, okay? So let's say I added that to my homework. This most probably is going to be reflecting the same homework that's on the Google Classroom that you've assigned there. And let's say your coordinator added also another classwork, which is classwork number one, and then classwork number two. All right, so this is number two, and then homework number 3, January 29. This is homework number 2. And then he or she adds the details there. So these are details of the classwork here, as well as details of the classwork here. So remember, these are only edited by your coordinator, okay? So here, for example, again, in the project, let's say you have a project by, let's say, February 12th deadline, and that's project number 1. So here is where your coordinator will be adding number 1, okay, details. And in this also last part is the quiz date, when the quiz is due. For example, you have quiz on, let's say, February 4, and this is quiz number 1, and let's say this is the lesson 1 and 2. Okay, so these details are filled in by your coordinator. So this gives you at the end an overview of, about all the homework that are there, the deadlines, the category of the homework, and description of each homework, classwork, project, and quizzes. And at the end, of course, you have the final exam. It's also filled in by a coordinator. So this is the first part of your overview page. And as you move down, you'll find there's a chart. Now, there's no data here because there are no grades, but once the grades are filled in, you find a lot of interesting data here to read across the sections, so you can have a very fruitful discussion with your colleagues. If you scroll more down, you have another chart. We're going to talk about this when we fill in the some of the information here. It shows the comparison between the sections in terms of how they perform. And then there is a part here where you and your team will be discussing the data. For example, when you look at the data itself, what is the data saying? Why might this be happening? And then you might take some steps to intervene and some possible intervention and enrichment. So we're going to get back to this later once we're done with the gradebook. The second part is individual report. I'm going to just go back to it at the end because what's important here now is your actual section. So that's the section. For example, I'm teaching grade 6 Aqua. Now in my section, the main components are the first part includes the section detail, which is grade 6 Science and Aqua. And I'll find my name here. And on the left side, you'll find the ID and the ID number of the student and the student name as well. Here we have the comment section. We're going to talk about this in a later tutorial. You don't have to bother about this now. And then you'll find here data of the average of the student grades across all components, as well as his level per letter, A plus, A minus, and so on. Okay? If you move to the left right, you find that the first component is your homework. This is where you enter the student grades. Okay? This is where you enter the student grades here. So let's say, for example, my coordinator has labeled homework 1, homework 2. You can find it here automatically. At the same time, if you recall that the coordinator also added labeling for the classwork 1, classwork 2, and the date as well, and for project 1, and for the quizzes. Now, if I want to start with the homework, if I have a homework, for example, I can just add the homework for my students, either manually, if it's not on Google Classroom. If it's on the Google Classroom, there's a tool here that we provided for you. If you look at this icon, this is going to import the grades from Google Classroom directly into Gradebook. So you don't have to go and copy and paste and do a lot of errors and so on. Okay, so let's just do just that now. So the first time you want to access Google Classroom, it's going to ask you for authentication. So I'm going to click that here. So if you notice that the first time I do that, it's going to ask me to authorize. This is for security reasons. And then it's going to ask me to access my and allow to access my details. So that's the first time you do it, and then you don't have to do it anymore. But before you start, make note that you need to access your gradebook with your school email account as the first account accessing your browser, which means that by default, my school email account should be the default email. All right, so let's say, for example, you accessed your browser with 3 different emails. 2 out of these are Gmail and 1 is your school email account. All right, your first account should be a school email account and not the second or third account. So if you have this error, you can just log out of all the accounts and then log in with your school email account. Okay, so let's start with that. I'm gonna just click on, let's say I want to import grades from the Google Classroom to this column I. Okay, so the first time it's gonna ask you about import, export grades from or to Classroom. Of course, our aim here is to import. We're going to discuss later on how to export it if we have missing data from in the Google Classroom. The default is emails in column A. Keep it as it is, column A. Do not change that. In the grades column, this is where you want to import the grades to your gradebook. Now, if you notice, if you look at the gradebook here, let's say I want to import them to my homework number 1. So homework number 1 lies in column I. If you notice at the top, you have the letters of the columns. A is hidden here, you cannot see it. B, C, F, G, H, I, J, K, and so on. So you have to look at the column letter. So if you look at the column letter here, you notice that it's I. Okay, so I'm going to change it to I here. Just make sure that it's the correct column. And then the row where the grades begin is always number 6. All right, so it's always number 6 because this is where it starts. If you look at the row, this is the row 6, right? So you only have to set up this one for the first time, then it's going to be by default row 6. Now the next step is to choose my classroom course. Of course, it's going to open the courses that you're in, depending on whether you're a teacher in 1 or 2 classes. So let's say, for example, I have this class I want to import from. All right, and then you need to choose to import grades from Classroom to Sheets and not export grades from Sheet to Classroom. All right, so here I can click on import grades from Classroom to Sheets, and now it's going to search for assignments that it finds in your grade, in your section. If it does not find any assignments there, it's not going to update anything. Okay. So here, for example, it's going to ask you to select the assignment you want to import. This is based on your discussion with your teachers and your coordinator, which one you want to import. Let's say, for example, I have this task, I want to import the assignment to, and then I click import to sheet. Once you click on import to sheet, it's going to take between 5 to 10 seconds to populate the data. Okay, so let's say I click import sheets, it's going to take some time, 5 to 10 seconds to update, and it's going to populate the data. So there it is. It populates directly into the column that you want to import. Notice that once you add the information here or the grades here, it's going to automatically calculate the homework average. All right. So the more you add here, it's going to calculate the homework average, as well as total average, as well as, of course, the letter, which is in this case is 60, then it's D, 70 is C minus, and so on. Okay. So this is one thing you can import from Google Classroom. The other way you can do that just quickly and automatically, manually, of course. So let's say I want to just copy and paste from somewhere, either from Google Classroom if I want to. or from somewhere else. Okay, so let's say at 70, 80, and so on. And let's say by mistake I added 106, and it's gonna give me an error because the number has to be between 0 and 105. So please pay attention, that's gonna be between 0 and 105. Usually we don't have scores below 40 as imported to the gradebook, as you know, by per school policy. So here we have 90, let's say 76, and so on. Notice that how it populates the average here and the average for the homework 2 as well. So this is the total average of the homework. This is the average of each homework component, and that's the total average for per whole gradebook. So here it is, and these are my 2 homework 1 and 2. Okay. Right, so I'm going to give you just one more example of how to import from Google Classroom in your classwork. So again, let's say I have this classwork 1, which is dated 2021-21. All right, and the description here says this is classwork 1, details of my classwork. So I'm going to go to Aqua. All right, and let's import from our Google Classroom. Notice that here there's a note here that helps you on how to import. Again, column A is by default. You choose the column for your grade you want to import, and then the row always begins with 6, and then choose import from gradebook. So notice that at the beginning we did that, and it becomes now a default in Google Classroom. So I'm going to just drag it here. Okay, so it's always A. The email column is always A, and the grades column here, it's changed because earlier we had this on column I because we included that in the homework. This is column I. Now we want to include them in the classwork, which is in this case classwork number 1 lies in column R. So I'm going to just change I into R. That's it. So the 6 is always number 6. The row always starts with number 6. And then I choose the course that I want to import from. So let's say I have Aqua. Here I don't have the example of Aqua, so I'm going to just give an example from another course. And the defaulted now is for importing grades. So I'm going to just click on again next, and then it's going to show me all the assignments that are there. And I'm going to choose one that is my classwork. So let's say this is the one, and then hit on import sheets, and it's going to take 5 to 10 seconds to import. And that's it. That's importing from Google Classroom. The same thing applies to the other ones. All right, so this is added by my coordinator, so you're going to need to fill that. The same thing applies to classwork here. Notice that also when you add information or data more than one, it's going to show the trend here. Okay, so here there's a drop between homework 1 and homework 2, as you notice, from 86 to 78. So there's something we need to matter to your attention here. Okay, so it shows also the trend of the data of information here. The same thing applies to classwork and projects as well. So the projects, on the other hand, the lowest grade is 40. So, for example, if you want to input that manually and you try to include a score less than 40, then it's going to give you a problem that it should be between 40 and 105. 105 actually is for those who have bonus, but it's very rare to add it. All right. Now, you don't have to bother about the quizzes on the final exam because they're going to populate directly. You're going to see them once the quiz is done. You're going to see it there, and they have the chance to look at the data and analyze it here as well. You can see the quiz 1 average, and you will see the quiz total quiz average as well, and you'll see the final exam as well here at the end of the year. And in the end, you'll also see your students' full final cumulative average towards the end of the year. All right, so I'm going to just fill in this just to give you an example. All right, so let's say I have all this data now. I have quiz 1, quiz 2, project 1, and some grades and classwork and homework. Okay, So I want to know, for example, how Abdulaziz is doing in terms of the, let's say, the classwork average. For this to happen, I can scroll all the way down, and here's going to show me to choose the student I want to query. For example, I want to see how Abdulaziz here is doing. So in this case, it's going to show me the class average, which is here in red, and in blue, you're going to find the student who is in query here, and it's going to show you the graph of the link between them, the comparison between them. So here it seems that Douglas is not doing very well in terms of the class average, neither in homework 1 because he got 60 and the average was 86. In homework 2, we got 70, while the class average is 78. So this shows me something to worry about for this student, where I can take action directly and see how he needs to improve. And the same thing applies to all the labels that you add in your section. At the same time, you can also access individual report for more data. For example, here I have my aqua. I can choose my aqua grade, and I can choose my students here. You can see them here. Now this is usually used by coordinators more than teachers, but you can also use that as well. So here you can give me all the information of the student, the total average, and it's going to show me the total average and the quiz average for that student, as well as all the components that he has, in addition to the how he progresses in terms of each component. In quizzes, how he's doing from quiz 1 to quiz 2, and that's the average from classwork 1, classwork 2, classwork 1, actually there's no classwork 2, therefore there's no line here. And you have homework 1, homework 2, and then project 1, and then you have the project average. So this also gives you a report site of how the students progressing in your section. Now to look at how your section is performing in terms of other sections. Now this is important as well because it drives lots of discussion of data. For example, you can see how another section is doing well, and you want to know how that teacher might be using different section techniques, for example, or approaches that you might want to use in your classroom as well. So this is a truly collaborative work. So for this to happen, you have to go back to the overview page. So let's go back to the overview page here. So in the overview sheet, if you scroll down, you find some interesting data here emerges as you add grades in your sections. So here, for example, it shows me how each section is performing per average in each one of these components. Homework 1, homework 2, classwork 1, classwork 2, or you can just look at the averages of the homework and the classwork as in compared to other sections. And you notice some interesting graphs here, and of course these show very close graphs, but usually in real life you find a lot of disparities among sections that might merit a lot of discussion between you and your colleagues. So you might have some sort of data session or data meeting, for example, to discuss the data. You might be looking, for example, at this one, Indigo, how Indigo is performing, not doing so well at the homework, but doing extremely well in the classwork as well, and as well as in the project and the quizzes as well. So this might be something that you might discuss, that how Indigo is performing well in the classwork and well in the quizzes, and what are the techniques that the teacher might be using, all right? You might also be looking at, for example, here, and the last one, which is in this case gold. It's not doing very well in the quizzes, so it might be something to do with some section practice, something you need to change in how you teach students. If you scroll more down, you'll find also how they average overall. So here we have the comparison of the sections. All right, so these are filled in: aqua, beige, brown, green, gold, and indigo. And you notice here that gold, for example, is not performing very well, and then you can compare the data and then see how each one is doing, and then you can talk about the data. And so when you get an insight of the data here, you can just sit together in a meeting and discuss what the data is saying. You can type in a response here about the data and then interpret why is this happening? Why the quizzes are they're not doing well in the quizzes? Why particular sections only are doing well in the quizzes? So you can spark a lot of discussions here on the data and then plan your next move or plan your next strategy. Okay. So you can notice that this gradebook is away from the silo, away from the what we call the lonely teacher working alone. It's more now a workspace, a collaborative workspace where everyone works together on the same gradebook. So to wrap up, the new gradebook allows you to look at data and directly in one place, for example, in the overview page. You can also look at individual reports in the individual report sheet, as well as, and I prefer teacher access this as well, in the same section comparing the student with the rest of the class. Okay, so here, for example, I can see how the student performing as compared to the rest of the class. At the same time, it will allow you to import quickly and without any error grades from Google Classroom, which is a very important feature in this gradebook that allows you to not to get any errors and at all. It's going to just directly import them from Google Classroom without copying and pasting, without the hassle of doing that, and it takes 5 to 7 seconds to do that as well. Last thing, which is important as well, is discussion of data and having data meetings with your team as well. So that's your gradebook.